This die only has one triangle on the die. I am going to, because this die will take up to 10 layers of fabric, I am going to start layering my fabric on the die. So these are 9.5-inch strips, and this first section is technically going to be waste unless I make sure that I have given enough to be able to cut a half triangle. And I didn't actually mark that, so let me go ahead and mark that now. If you remember from the Isosceles triangle that we did for the Go and the Studio, to mark your half triangle, you need to actually give yourself an extra 1/4 inch past the halfway mark in order to cut a triangle that's going to be big enough to use on the end. So I've moved the mark past the halfway point, and I'm using a dashed line instead of a solid line, and then I'm going to measure that distance from the dashed line to the outside registration line that I drew, and that's 4.5 inches is a half triangle. Okay, so I've written that upside down on the die, but that's okay. And so I want to make sure that this first piece is at least 4.5 inches so that I'm going to get a half triangle with that first cut. Okay, so I'm going to take that mark, I'm just using my fingers to say that's 4.5 inches, and I'm going to take that mark and move that over so that my first cut is going to give me that 4.5 inches. Okay? So I'm just moving this line. Sorry, it's not that line. Yeah, it is this line. Okay. So what I'm doing here is just making sure that that first cut is 4.5 inches back so that I can come back and cut that half triangle off. Okay? So that's one strip. I can do this now that I know where that aligns. I can lay another strip down. And I'm just going to keep adding strips, and these strips are folded in half, and I'll show you why that part is okay. It's okay because my fold is over here. I don't want to do this because that's going to be problematic, and it might not give me enough room to cut the last triangle. So I like to leave my folds out whenever I'm cutting single shapes like this. Okay, so there's my 10 layers. I'm going to place the mat on top of the die, and I am cutting with the Big Shot Pro. This is a studio die, but I'm just really loving how convenient this Big Shot Pro is to move onto my cutting surface for the purpose of doing videos. There is a little bit more room in this tray because the die is not as wide as the tray, but I remember that I have a straight edge along the bottom or the top. I can't remember which side it's on, but because there is a straight edge, I want to angle the die just a little bit in the tray so that I'm not cutting that straight edge all at once across. The extra fabric that I have here, I'm just going to roll up next to the die and lay that in the tray so that it doesn't get caught as I push this through. So I'm pushing the die through, the handle lifts up the direction that I want to turn, and then I'm just going to turn it. Okay, that's all there is to it. So let's take a look at what we have. So off comes the mat, and out come all of these fabulous, fabulous triangles. So that was really easy. So that is 10 triangles just with that one cut. Okay, so now in order to cut the rest of these, so you'll notice that if I just slid this down, I'm going to waste a lot of fabric. So I'm going to actually slide it down and flip it over so that I can nest these. And what I want to do is actually cut off this extra piece, because this is, I'm going to use this later to cut, but I just want to snip that off so that it doesn't get in the way when I'm cutting. So I'm going to find where my dies, where my blades are here, and I just want to just barely cover the blades, lay this down, and then I'm going to cut again. These die cutters work in both directions, so notice that I didn't move the tray back to the other side. I'm just going to run this back through this direction. So it's very convenient. You can sort of conserve movement here. So here's my next set of triangles. Okay. And I've got a little bit of scrap here. So I cut this off. And flip this over. So this is the next to the last cut. Again, I'm just making sure that the straight edges are aligned with the registration lines that I drew, and that I'm covering the ends of the blade with my fabric. There's my triangles. Cutting off this excess, sliding down and flipping this way, making sure that my straight edges are aligned, and you can see that I'm going to get my 5 cuts here. And there are a couple, sometimes there's a couple of threads that don't get cut, and those are pretty easy to take care of. And now what I want to see is, I just want to see if this last piece is big enough for me to open up and get one more triangle. And it is. So I'm going to lay these down, making sure that the straight edges are aligned, and I'll straighten this back up, but right now I'm just straightening making sure the pieces are aligned with each other. And it looks like this fold is a little bit more stubborn than I thought, so I would probably press these lightly once more. Okay, so that's aligned, and I'm going to get 5 more triangles from here. So as you can see, and I'll just pull in my little pile of scraps here. So you can see that this was very little waste from all of those cuts that I did, and I got 10, 20, 30, 40, 45 of these giant triangles. So if I do the math, okay, I can't do that much math in my head. I'm pretty sure that a lot of these are going to end up in my shop, because there's no way I can use that many isosceles triangles, but it's going to be great to have them all cut up. So hopefully you enjoyed that video, and we'll see you again next time. Happy quilting and cutting. Thank you.